Drive Carefully, Rudy. There he is, Rudy's Rock. We're getting close to the time, I suppose, Bill, of that first incredible tour that you were mentioning a moment ago, when you arrived at Southampton and the train and the people lining the route.
Yeah, I think now we are. You'll have to get the historian Hugh McCullum to comment.
All right,
on that
Hugh,
one.
get things in perspective here. Where are
Well,
we?
what Bill says is quite right, that shortly after recording Rudy's Rock, Bill did in fact come over here in February 1957 for 6 weeks on that fantastic tour, which I'm sure no one will ever forget, anyone that was involved with it. It was quite incredible.
Hugh, you did bring back the memory. I was reading something there at the moment when you asked me that. The big thing happened in the States and South America and Central America, and it had started in England. But about this time, Blackboard Jungle had gone its way and done its good as far as the career of Bill Haley and the Comets. And came our illustrious movie career, which I always laugh about whenever, how many movies have you made? We made 11, but I don't think we made an impression with many of them. But we did a film for Universal International called Roundup of Rhythm, which has since been lost in the maze of many films. But we signed with Columbia Pictures, and we did a movie. The first movie, naturally, I suppose quite naturally, was called Rock Around the Clock. This was the one, I think, that caused the dancing in the theaters all around and brought about the tour of England. And I think with this movie, more than Blackboard Jungle, I think the movie Rock Around the Clock and Don't Knock the Rock for Columbia brought about the tour, because this is the one that the kids were dancing in the aisles in the theaters and what have you, tearing up the seats and marching in the streets and what have you. We had just finished the movie. We had gone to Australia, and it seems rather strange because this is exactly what we're doing now. We just came back from Australia now as we came to England. We came across on the Queen Elizabeth, and this was right after we had done Rudy's Rock, and we did Rudy's Rock in the film, by the way, so that brings you up to date here.
Yeah.
Great. Well, the next one we've got is in fact a ballad that you did, Bill, around November 57. And I was saying to Roger earlier before you actually came that this was around the time, I think I'm right in saying, in the States when the first generation rock was beginning to sort of die out, and you were sort of looking for different new sounds, and you recorded this one, It's a Sin.
Yes, well, Hugh, the thought behind it as we were in the studios, by that time we had done quite a few things for Decca Records, and I had become very friendly with Milt Gabler, and the powers that be in those days. Of course, there was a great splurge because this was the days when Elvis was coming up with RCA Victor, and the people at Decca were saying, you know, we want to cover all fields, and they wouldn't let me do country and western music, which was my first love. As I said, we were a country and western band first, and I wanted to because we had so many fans that loved country and western music, and I finally persuaded them to let me cut a country and western song, and as it turned out, why it hit for us. So it was called It's a Sin.
It's a Sin.
It's a Sin. Bill Haley and the Comets.
It's a sin.
It's a Sin. You're still very much your roots are very deeply embedded in country music, aren't they, even today?
Well, yes, Roger. We, I think not our latest album, but the one before was called Rocking Around the Country, and I don't know if Hugh plans to, or if you plan to play one.
Well, we hope to get to a couple of tracks later on.
One side from this, but there's two of my very favorite tunes in there. One is, of course, Me and Bobby McGee. There's a story behind that one too, which we'll get to, and A Little Piece at a Time, which is a very beautiful country ballad. But there's a big move on at the moment. In fact, they've been after me for the last year to give up my rock and roll music and go back to country and western. But I've told them I'll never do this. You know that I occasionally love to do some country songs, and I may listen to them at home, but I've got to stick with rock and roll.
Right. Okay, let's get to a telephone and talk to Philip Brannan, who should be on the line. Hello, Philip.
Oh, good morning, Roger.
Good morning. Would you like to talk to Bill?
Yes. Hello, Bill, and welcome to Britain.
Well, thank you, Philip. A pleasure talking to you.
The question I'd like to ask you is about the film Rock Around the Clock and Don't Knock the Rock.
Yes?
I believe the producer was Sam Katzman.
Sam Katzman, that's true,
I believe
Philip.
he's got a reputation for making films very, very quickly.
Well, yes, and Sam passed away recently, Philip. I was just in Los Angeles about 3 weeks ago doing a television show called Happy Days, and I met his son, and Sam passed away in the past year. But Sam was famous for this, what they call quickie films. He did Rock Around the Clock and also Don't Knock the Rock, and after that tried to follow it with, I don't know if you remember, but he did a Joey D thing, Twist Around the Clock, and he must have done 15 or 16 like that.
Oh, that is a surprise. You know, there hasn't been anything in our press about Sam dying. That is a great shock.
Yes.
Well, I understand you also involved, you mentioned earlier, about Alan Freed.
Yes, what would you like to know about Alan?
Well, I understand the surprising thing was he had a show which was broadcast over here on another station, and he didn't seem to play many of your records.
Well, Alan and I were great friends, but we were also competition. You see, Alan used to do his own rock and roll shows, as you know, and he was an impresario, and he was a very fine man, as I said, a dear friend of mine, but we were strictly competition because as Alan would be at the Brooklyn Paramount in New York, I would be at the Palace Theater down the street, and for this reason it wasn't good business for Alan to be plugging Bill Haley and having Chuck Berry headlining his show. So this is the reason, but it didn't necessarily mean we weren't very dear friends. We were.
Just briefly, going back to the film I mentioned about Rock Around the Clock, have you got any stories about on the set, you know, any stories about the film?
While we were making it?
Yes.
Well, yes, Philip. I'll tell you one or two that you'll probably chuckle at. I met a very beautiful young lady at that time called Kim Novak, and while I was filming while we were doing the film on the set, Kim used to come every day and sit and watch us do the things. And of course, I'm not the greatest actor in the world, but if you have Kim Novak smiling at you from about 15 feet away, I couldn't remember the few lines that I had. I couldn't remember, you know. So this was one of them. Tony Curtis. I met a lot of the Hollywood personalities, and but this is the one that I've always remembered and always laughed at every time I see her on the screen.
You won't believe it, yes.
Yeah.
There was just one final thing. You mentioned about being stuck in the middle of the Delaware River.
Yes.
On my only trip to the States, I went across the Delaware Memorial Bridge. It was very, very impressive. And I can imagine it was quite an experience to be stuck in the middle of that river.
Well, yeah, it sure was. I wish they'd had the bridge there, but perhaps if they had, my luck wouldn't have been so great on that one trip, Philip.
Very true. Thank you very much, Bill. Thank you very much indeed.
Nice talking to you.
Okay, Philip, thank you very much. All right, Hugh, what you got next?
Well, the next one we've got is a rather unusual title for a record. It's a thing about a very skinny little lady called Skinny Minnie.
Treetop tall, and she's a long drink on a mountaintop.
Yeah, Skinny Minnie, Bill Haley and the Comets. 26 minutes past 1 o'clock. This is Capital, and it's Cruising on a Saturday afternoon in the studio with Bill Haley. Bill, I don't know if it's a delicate subject or a touchy subject, but after you had come here for that incredible tour, then it all sort of suddenly went down a bit. The record sales, whilst the following was still there, that the hysteria all died down.
Well, I've never been able to explain this myself, Roger. I think it was a case of the calm after the storm, because I don't know, and I hate to say this, it sounds probably a little egotistical, but I don't think there's ever been a tour like that. I don't think even with the Beatles, with the great success that they've had, and Elvis and all of them, unless you had been there and seen it, I can remember one night in numerous cities, but in Coventry, I can remember after the show, we had gone back and the people had marched in the streets until about 3 in the morning, and they were storming the hotel. We had gone to sleep, and I remember the manager of the hotel woke me up to just go out on the balcony and wave, because to stop them from tearing the front doors off the hotel. And if you can imagine enthusiasm like that over music. And I think that once the tour had finished and we went back and the people realized it was over, because I don't think it was for Bill Haley. It was an era. It was an explosion of music, of freedom of music, and I think it was just the calm, you know. And I think then they were ready for something new. And of course, you add that to the fact that at this time Carl Perkins was breaking loose, and Pat Boone and Fats Domino and Chuck Berry and Elvis Presley, with his great surge that came on at that moment. it was just a case of the public just going on to something, you know, because they'd had, before we came to Britain, I think some 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 months, the Daily Mirror and all the newspapers, all the television, all the radio, yeah, they'd heard nothing but Bill Haley for 6 months, and naturally it was just a case of pure saturation of one artist.
Overexposure and overkill. Maybe.
So, and if I think at that time, Hugh, you can quote this better than I, but we had something like 13 of the top 20, didn't we, or something? Or?
You shouldn't ask me that question, because before you came in, I said to Roger, the one thing that I can't remember is how many records were in the charts and when.
Well,
but basically, yeah, what you said is right.
I do think, and
the charts were virtually just Bill Haley.
I do know that the top 10, we had 7 of them at one time, and so when you realize that success that great, that it's just a case of they just had too much of Bill Haley, and it was time for something new. So it's really not quite so surprising if you think about it, you know.
Yeah. Let's take another call. I think we've got Tony on the line. Hello, Tony.
Good morning, Roger.
Good morning. Talk to Bill.
Good morning, Bill.
Good morning, Tony. How are you?
Very well, thank you. Nice to see you back in England again.
Well, thank you, Tony. It's very nice to
Can I
hear you
just
say it.
confirm what you said, that was a fantastic tour in 1957. I remember seeing you at Croydon.
Well, thank you, Tony.
And I spent all my pocket money on a whole 4-shilling ticket to get in to see you then.
Oh, wonderful. Well, you know, Tony, every time I come back to England, I met so many people then that I didn't have time to even say hello to, and over the years, as we come back, we meet very nice people like yourself, you know?
Thank you. What I'd like to ask you about is something actually you mentioned earlier on. I've got a record of yours, a very old 78, with Sundown Boogie and Green Tree Boogie on it.
Yes.
And if I'd never heard of you as a rock and roll star, I would have imagined you were just a country and western singer, if I can say that word just. I mean, you know, a top country and western singer.
Well, at that time, Tony, we were.
I was just going to say, did you originally start in country and western?
Yes, we had a group originally, as I said earlier on the program, called Bill Haley and the Four Aces of Western Swing. Then we became Bill Haley and the Saddlemen, and when we recorded these songs you're talking about, we were very definitely a country and western group. I had planned to go to the Grand Ole Opry in Nashville, and this was my bag in life at that moment, you know, because this was before I realized we were going to have a thing like rock and roll.
Yes. And the other thing I was wondering was that, you know, listening to that record and some of the early Presley records and Carl Perkins, etc., they all seem sort of very deep-rooted in country and western, and I was just wondering if you did feel that country and western played an important part in the development of rock and roll.
Well, Tony, the thing that so often, and I keep saying, I'm not trying to champion black entertainers or black music, but you must always remember that rock and roll music is country and western and rhythm and blues, and we chose at that time, or the public chose, I should say, artists from both fields, and it was not only Carl Perkins, Pat Boone, Elvis Presley, Bill Haley, but there was also Little Richard, Fats Domino, Chuck Berry, Bo Diddley, and from the rhythm and blues field, and Big Joe Turner and Laverne Baker and the Platters, and all of us got together, black and white, hand in hand, and produced this music as it is today. See?
Oh, I see.
Okay, Tony?
Yeah. Thanks very much then, Roger.
Thank you very much.
Thank you,
Bye-bye.
Tony.
Bye-bye.
What you got next for us, Hugh? Something a little unusual?
Yeah, something a little bit unusual, as you say, Roger. It's an instrumental thing that I think I'm right in saying, Bill, that you picked up in Mexico. It's called Joey's Song, and it was a big hit for you in 1958 in the States.
Different, as you said, Hugh.
Very different. Yeah,
You
it was a big
said
hit.
it was recorded in Mexico.
No, I said actually, Bill's corrected me while it was playing. I said that it was a tune that Bill picked up on one of his tours to Mexico. In fact, he tells me it was Argentina.
There's quite a story to this one, Roger, too. It's we were in Argentina, in Buenos Aires, looking for something different, and Decca had said, Bill, there's an awful put down by musicians around the world saying, this rock and roll, you know, there's nothing to it, man. You know, those guys know 3 chords and that's it. And he had said he'd like to do an album to prove that the Comets could play something besides just the 3-chord blues, you know. We were in Argentina, and a man named Joe Reisman, who I'm sure you've heard his name many times, a great writer, arranger, and great man in the music field, had written a tune called Joey's Song and recorded it with violins and what have you. And it hadn't hit. And I heard it in Argentina, brought it back, and re-recorded it as Joey's Song, and there it is.
And it was a hit.
Mm-hmm.
A very big hit, yes.